The greatest battles are not fought in crowds. They are fought in the silence of solitude. When God called Abraham, he didn't call his cousins. When God anointed David, his own brothers were left behind in the field. You keep waiting for people to walk with you, but what if the next level demands that you walk alone? Let me ask you, can you handle isolation without losing your identity? Because some journeys are sacred, and sacred journeys are never walked in multitudes. Today, I am not here to teach you how to be liked. I'm here to teach you how to be set apart. Because if you're going to walk alone, you must walk strong. Some of the most significant assignments from heaven never came with fanfare. They came in moments when the world was silent and the soul was stripped bare. You see, when God is getting ready to do something through you, the first thing he often does is subtract the crowd. Not because people are evil, but because they can't carry what's about to be revealed. And what's sacred is never shared with the casual. Let me show you something. When God whispered to Samuel in the night, he didn't speak in the daylight. He didn't wait for the ceremony. He waited until the boy was alone in the temple, tucked away behind silence. Divine assignments are rarely delivered in groups. They are handed to individuals in the quiet corners of obedience. Some of you are angry that nobody's calling your name right now, but maybe heaven is. Maybe the silence around you is the sound of God choosing you privately before he exposes you publicly. When God wanted to start a nation, he didn't speak to a committee. He called one man, Abram. He said, leave your country, your family, and your father's household. Genesis 12:1. You know what that means? Leave what's familiar. Leave what makes you feel safe. Leave the voices that taught you how to think. Why? Because sometimes, in order for God to build something through you, he first has to tear something off of you. You can't build a future when you're still tangled in your past. And let me say this clearly, not everyone you love is qualified to walk with you. That's hard to hear, but necessary to know. Just because they were part of your history doesn't mean they're destined for your assignment. Some of the people you're trying to hold on to were never meant to survive the elevation. They love the version of you they can control, but God is birthing a version of you they'll no longer recognize. And the more you grow, the more uncomfortable they become. Don't confuse loneliness with abandonment. Just because you're by yourself doesn't mean you're forsaken. Jesus was alone in Gethsemane, but angels were still watching. Elijah hid in the cave, but heaven still had him on assignment. And you? Yes, you might feel left behind, but what if God is actually setting you apart? There is a difference between being isolated and being consecrated. I remember a young woman who wanted to launch a mentorship program for teenage mothers in her city. She planned, she prayed, she posted on social media, but no one signed up to help. She cried, she felt abandoned, but she moved forward anyway. One woman, one vision, one step at a time. A year later, the city government funded her work. The same people who ignored her were now asking to join her. Why? Because obedience in isolation will always attract favor in due season. God does not anoint crowds. He anoints individuals. The question is not, why am I alone? The real question is, what am I carrying that requires me to be alone right now? Some of you are pregnant with things that people around you can't even understand. And just like a mother who carries life inside her, there comes a time where she has to walk differently, eat differently, and even separate herself, not because she's better, but because she's protecting the future inside her. So hear me, stop begging for company in a season designed for consecration. Stop apologizing for the distance. You're not arrogant. You're assigned. You're not cold. You're being called. And if God is pulling you away from the crowd, it's because He's preparing you to carry something the crowd was never meant to hold. Don't resist the separation. Don't despise the silence. Because when heaven speaks, it rarely shouts. It whispers. And only those who are willing to walk alone will ever be close enough to hear it. Strength is not proven when the lights are on. Strength is proven when there's no one left to clap. You don't know what you're made of until you have to stand in a storm by yourself with nothing in your hands but a word from God. That's where true power is born, not in company, not in popularity, but in the crucible of silence. Everyone wants to be strong, but no one wants to be tested. You don't get strength from wishing for it. You get it by walking through things that could have killed you, but didn't. Real strength is not developed in comfort. It's born in conflict. It's when you're tired, but you choose to stand. It's when you're confused, but you refuse to quit. It's when your own thoughts start betraying you, but you still don't break. There's a boy in a city who lost his mother at 14. No father in sight, no inheritance, just pain and a few worn-out books. He got laughed at for wearing the same shoes to school, marked for studying too much. No mentors, no invitations, just him and a dream. But do you know what happened? That boy grew into a man who wrote legislation that changed education laws in his country, alone, in silence, without applause. Because strength was formed in a room no one ever visited. You see, too many people wait to feel strong before they move. But real strength doesn't show up before you walk. It shows up as you walk. The Red Sea didn't split when Moses prayed. It split when he stretched his hand. The miracle didn't happen at a distance. It happened in the motion. You keep asking God for strength, but He's waiting for you to move. Faith without motion is noise. And let me tell you something. If you always need someone to stand with you, the enemy only has to take one person out to make you collapse. God will often let people disappear, not to break you, but to build a backbone in you that doesn't depend on human hands. You're not called to be a puppet on the strings of support. You're called to be a pillar in a generation that's crumbling. When they abandoned you, that wasn't weakness. It was training. When they ignored your ideas, it wasn't failure, it was muscle building. You cannot lead people you're too afraid to walk away from. The most dangerous person in any room is the one who has learned how to survive without applause. That person is unshakable. That person is free. Even Jesus had to walk some roads alone. When He turned to the disciples and asked, "Will you also leave?" He wasn't begging. He was testing their foundation. Because your real strength is not seen when everyone agrees with you. It's exposed when you stand on truth, even if truth isolates you. You will never know what you carry until God removes your crutches. Strength is not what you feel. Strength is what you decide. It is forged in rejection, polished in silence, and proven in obedience. And if you dare to keep walking when no one else shows up, you'll discover a power that no crowd could ever give you. Because strength isn't something you wear, it's who you become. If you keep waiting for people to agree with your calling, you will die with your gift still locked inside you. Let me say this clearly. Agreement is not confirmation, and applause is not approval. Most people can't see the weight of what's been deposited in you because it wasn't sent to them. And yet, we are addicted to validation. We delay our next step, our next move, our next assignment, all because we are waiting for someone to co-sign a vision they were never invited into. You don't need a vote when you've already been appointed. If God gave you the blueprint, why are you looking for permission to build? You weren't created by committee, so stop trying to live by consensus. Vision doesn't consult the comfort of the crowd. It confronts it. One of the most dangerous things you can do is lower the volume of your calling to match the expectations of people who are afraid to step out themselves. Some people aren't doubting you. They're threatened by the mirror your boldness holds up to their fear. They can't imagine doing what you're doing because it exposes their own decision to stay small. So they'll discourage you, not because it's not possible, but because your faith convicts their apathy. I once spoke to a young man who wanted to start a social enterprise for prisoners transitioning back into society. He had the plan, he had the heart, but every time he shared it with others, they laughed. They told him to get a real job, that no one would fund felons. And for a while, he stopped dreaming. He folded his wings to fit into their cage. Until one day, after sitting with an inmate who said, "No one believes in me," it hit him. They didn't need the world's permission. They needed his obedience. He started alone. His car was the office. His hands were the marketing team. But 2 years later, he had opened 3 re-entry centers and trained over 400 men. Not because someone believed in him, but because he chose to move even when no one else did. Listen to me. If you need constant agreement to walk in your assignment, the enemy only has to plant one negative voice to paralyze you. But when you're grounded in revelation, resistance becomes fuel. Some of the greatest moves of God started with one person and a ridiculous idea that no one else understood. When the angel came to Mary, there was no committee, just a word and a womb. If she had asked for a second opinion, she might have forfeited her moment. And that's the danger. Some of us are aborting divine assignments because we're consulting people who haven't heard. Agreement is comfortable, but obedience is costly. And most of the time, obedience will require you to look foolish in the eyes of people who are comfortable with average. But average never shook nations. Agreement never split seas. Crowds never raised the dead. You don't need their applause to walk in your authority. You just need to believe what God whispered, even when no one else does. Because sometimes faith looks like this. One step, no confirmation, just conviction. And that's enough to move mountains. There comes a point in your life where silence becomes your strategy, not because you are weak, but because you are wise. When you're on a divine path, not everything deserves your response. Not every critic earns your attention, and not every battle is yours to fight. Maturity is learning that some battles are distractions in disguise. You don't see eagles arguing with pigeons. You don't hear lions justifying themselves to jackals. Why? Because identity doesn't need explanation. When you know who sent you, you don't waste energy defending where you're going. People who are assigned to destiny don't debate with those still trying to figure out their direction. I remember hearing about a young woman who was called to create a digital platform to disciple women in rural areas. No fancy graphics, no major funding, just a stirring in her spirit. When she launched it, people called it small, unpolished, unnecessary. She heard the criticism. She saw the mocking, but she stayed quiet. She didn't post responses. She didn't argue in the comments. She kept building. 3 years later, her platform reached over 500,000 women in 9 different languages. Why? Because when your focus is divine, your silence becomes louder than their noise. You don't need to clap back when you're called forward. Jesus was silent before Herod, silent before the Sanhedrin, silent before Pilate. Why? Because when your destiny is fixed, accusation becomes irrelevant. He wasn't avoiding truth, he was obeying timing. That's the difference between carnal reaction and spiritual discipline. Real authority knows when to speak and when to let silence shake the room. Sometimes your silence is not weakness, it's a weapon. It unsettles people who expect you to panic. It confuses those who expect you to collapse. And it protects what God is still forming in secret. Don't give the enemy vocabulary to use against your vision. When you talk too soon, you can lose what's still in incubation. Not everything needs defending. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is stay quiet and build. Because when God is your defender, your results will speak for you. And when heaven is backing you, no amount of noise can cancel what's been sealed in eternity. You were never designed to follow the crowd. You were built to carry the weight of originality. But originality is lonely. And that's the cost many are unwilling to pay. We live in a generation addicted to templates. Copying trends, recycling ideas, reposting what's already been accepted. But the world doesn't change through repetition. It changes when someone dares to introduce what's never been seen. You can't innovate if you're always imitating. God did not make you to echo voices. He formed you to release a sound that hasn't existed yet. But hear me clearly, that kind of sound will always feel awkward at first. Pioneers often look like rebels before they're celebrated as leaders. People fear what they don't recognize, and that includes you when you start walking differently, talking differently, thinking at a level that makes others uncomfortable. But comfort is the enemy of greatness. No one applauded Noah when he started building the ark because there had never been rain. They laughed, they scoffed, they mocked. Why? Because what he was doing didn't match what they had experienced. But God doesn't need people's memories to launch a movement. He needs obedience, even when the blueprint makes no earthly sense. There's a man I once met who decided to transform shipping containers into mobile schools in war-torn villages. People told him it was absurd, impractical, dangerous, unrealistic, but he did it anyway. First 1, then 3, then 20. And in places where bullets had stolen classrooms, his containers became sanctuaries of light. No one believed in it at the beginning. But they didn't need to, because when you're carrying something from heaven, earth doesn't need to understand it. That's what it means to walk alone and walk strong. Not just because no one's with you, but because you've accepted the cost of being first. Being first means being misunderstood. It means carrying blueprints others can't read yet. It means enduring seasons where you feel like a stranger, even to yourself. But hear me, you weren't made to blend in. You were made to disrupt, to challenge, to build what doesn't yet exist. And sometimes that means walking into rooms where no one else looks like you, thinks like you, or believes like you, and still refusing to shrink. Because if God trusted you with something original, He also gave you the strength to carry it, even if you have to carry it alone. And what starts alone will one day become the standard if you dare to keep building what no one else sees. You must understand, isolation is not abandonment, it is incubation. When God pulls you away from the crowd, He's not punishing you, He's preparing you. Greatness is not born on the stage, it is conceived in the dark. The womb of separation is where heaven does its most sacred work. But we resist this because silence feels like rejection. Emptiness feels like failure, and being unseen feels like being forgotten. Yet the truth is, the deeper the assignment, the longer the solitude. The higher the calling, the quieter the training. If you're being hidden, it's because what you carry cannot be rushed. God doesn't place diamonds on display while they're still being formed. Look at the seed. No one applauds it when it's underground. No one celebrates the darkness of dirt, the pressure of soil, or the pain of breaking open. But unless the seed breaks, what's inside will never emerge. And that's the divine contradiction. Sometimes your isolation is the proof that something eternal is about to be born through you. There's a young woman who lost her job, her fiancé, and her community all in 1 year. She told me she felt like her entire identity had been erased. But during that season of forced stillness, she began to write, not to be seen, just to survive. What she didn't know was that her journal would one day become a book that healed thousands. You see, God wasn't stripping her down to destroy her. He was clearing the noise so she could finally hear him. He isolated her so he could identify her. Moses was called on the throne of Egypt. He was called on the backside of the desert. David wasn't anointed in the palace. He was found in the fields. Even Christ was led by the Spirit into the wilderness before he ever performed a miracle. Because isolation is heaven's boot camp. It's where confidence is forged, clarity is born, and compromise is burned off your life. So when you find yourself in that lonely place, don't curse it, consecrate it. Stop asking, why am I alone? And start declaring, what am I becoming? Because if you embrace the season that empties you, you will emerge with something no crowd could ever give you, the unshakable identity of a person who has been formed in the presence of God. And once you've been formed there, you'll never be ordinary again. And let me leave you with this. You were never meant to fit in. You were designed to stand out. And yes, the walk may be lonely. Yes, the silence may stretch longer than expected. But don't you dare misinterpret your isolation as insignificance. Don't confuse delay with denial. The road you walk may be narrow, but it leads to something eternal. And though no one may clap, no one may post, and no one may notice, heaven is watching. You don't need a crowd to be called. You don't need agreement to move forward. You don't need affirmation to become who God ordained you to be. Walk alone, walk strong, and if you must walk with tears in your eyes, walk anyway. If you must walk with questions in your mind, walk anyway. Because every step you take in obedience sends a ripple into eternity. Let the world watch you rise from silence. Let them witness what happens when someone refuses to settle, refuses to shrink, and dares to build what only heaven showed them. You are not behind. You are not abandoned. You are becoming. So go, build, move, speak, create, lead, even if no one understands. Even if no one comes with you, even if you must walk alone. Because walking alone doesn't mean you are empty. It means you are ready. Good luck on your journey. May your steps be bold, your faith unshakable, and your voice unmuzzled. Thank you. And may heaven confirm every word you've received today.